Welcome to Beyond the Closing Table. I'm your host, Michael Martin, and we're here to interview top producing real estate agents, top producing mortgage lenders, and business owners. Very excited to have my new guest, Darrena Yehia. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Excellent. And I said your name already.
You did,
right?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So you and I have had the opportunity to get to know each other really just over the last maybe 6 months or so, maybe a little longer than that. Very excited to have you here today. I think this is going to be a fun conversation for us, but certainly if anybody listening, you have a lot to bring to the table, a lot of really unique stories to share, and I'm more excited to get even more learned about those things. So,
well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. This is my first podcast, by the way.
All right. Well, today you will be this will be your first one, but probably first of many. So excited to have you here. So let's just dive in real quickly and talk a little bit about your background. So maybe like where you're from. We'll naturally at some point get into how you got into real estate, but let's talk about your background, like where you're from and what you did maybe before real estate.
So I'm actually from North Carolina, which I know sometimes can be rare, especially like people are constantly moving here from all over. So I'm actually born and raised here. I'm third generation, grew up in Charlotte, so born in the same hospital as my grandmother, my mother, and so it's kind of fun that we have that lineage of actually being true North Carolinians.
Where in Charlotte?
Charlotte proper.
Okay.
Just like my grandmother's house is so close to the Panther Stadium, so that area, like Charlotte.
Dilworth, almost like area.
Yeah. So and then Matthews. We spent some time in like Matthews Indian Trail area as I grew up. So we moved a couple of times, but no. So my whole family's still there. I moved to Raleigh in 2006, and I went to Campbell University. So that's kind of what brought me to this area, and I loved Raleigh. I just felt like this was home, and I wanted to kind of just plant my roots here, so that's why I stayed.
Very cool. Yeah. So what, just out of curiosity, why did you end up going to Campbell?
So fun story. I'm actually the first person in my family to go to college, and I didn't really know how to go about that, like touring colleges and schools. So I picked my 3 smartest friends that I had in high school, and they were going to Campbell. And I was like, okay, if the 3 people that I think are smart and I admire, they're going there, it must be a good school. So I ended up going on some college tours with them, and that's how I ended up selecting Campbell. It was just far enough away from home, but not like too far. So
yeah, well, Bowie's Creek.
Yeah, it was kind of a culture shock moving from Charlotte, the city, and then I moved and I was living in like Fuquay and Andover and Harnett County areas, and I was like, wow, does everyone work at John Deere? Like, where's all the things to do? And then I discovered Raleigh, and it was okay.
Got it. My girlfriend in college that's where she went to undergrad school. Actually, my first wife went to where she went to school is Bowie's Creek. So she's told me all about that area.
It's not some place that I tend to frequent because there's not like a destination outside of the school. But it was good. It was a great school. Got a good education, and then it kept me here.
And now they got their law school downtown Raleigh.
They do,
That's
yeah.
Right.
So I feel like that and the pharmacy school, and they've got the great business stuff. And now they have football, so they've got some good sports again. So it's growing.
The Campbell Camels, right?
Yes, the Camels.
That's right. So you graduated from there, and then did you move back to Charlotte?
I did not. I actually moved about walking distance from here. Okay. So, which is cool, full circle. I live right down the street from here anyway. And so moved in. My college roommate and I actually lived together for 10 years.
Wow.
So after I got out of school, we stayed together, and I just planted roots in this little area. I remember training for like half marathons, running all the way from Falls up to Creedmoor, and just I love it around here. So
that's great. Well, what were you doing for work after you graduated?
Okay, so I started working at Chick-fil-A when I was in high school. Actually, I think I remember begging my parents, like, please, I want gas money. I want to go buy cool clothes, and I really wanted spending cash. So got a job. I was 15. I was like the earliest I think you could get a worker's permit in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. So I started working there then. And then after college, I actually stayed with Chick-fil-A through college. So being one of the first people in my family to go to college, I paid my own way through school, and Campbell wasn't exactly cheap. Yeah, sure. So I worked through Chick-fil-A through then, and then I ended up working at the Chick-fil-A right over here after school. But
like the one just up here at Six Forks?
Six Forks, okay. Yeah. Wow. So I worked there for many years. I worked at quite a few of the Triangle locations, so we kind of move around. But after college, I got a job opportunity with Chick-fil-A corporate helping to open their new restaurants. And so I came on as a grand opening consultant. And I traveled all around the country for a couple of years. I have lots of Marriott points. And it was cool being young and single and just getting to see the country. So worked 80, 100-hour weeks sometimes, but really neat. So you'd get ground level, it was dirt. You'd work out of a construction trailer and you worked with site supers to build the restaurants, and then you would help hire staff members. So I have done thousands of interviews to help hire the talent that Chick-fil-A is known for with their hospitality. And then you would do everything from teaching them how to do a truck order to setting up, their systems and processes and getting everything on this, like how to do a schedule for 80 people at a grand opening. And so we had a lot of operational work that you would do in coaching. So we got to fly people in from all over the country, and I got to hand select people I wanted to work with. So it was really cool.
That is really interesting. I'm curious, and we'll probably maybe lean this as we talk about what you do now in a bit, but I'm definitely curious how the interviewing process, learning that from Chick-fil-A has helped you in your real estate career, because that's certainly, I can tell you as a business owner, right, running my own business now for 20 some years and really my own team for a little over 10, one of the biggest certainly challenges that I've had is learning how to hire people, right? Because what I found is most people, especially that aren't trained like you probably were, we just hire for a spot. Like, we need this spot filled. You sound like you'd be fine. Let's stick you in that spot. And then it sucks, right? It just, bad training,
a lot of
bad.
Trial and error.
Yeah. And so we've had lots of folks that were great people. They just weren't great for us in that time, in that moment, in that spot.
Yeah, Chick-fil-A has a very strict interview process for becoming an operator, but also on the granular level of just hiring team members. I always like to kind of identify like who's my leadership, and getting your leadership right, I think, is a key metric to helping flow, like who else you're hiring. So if you think, I'm hiring for a backup house, well, who's the leader that I have back there? What's their personality type? We maybe even do like a disc profile on them. And so you're trying to almost fill the gaps of, okay, I need someone that's going to be really detail oriented for this position, or I need somebody that's really charismatic for the drive-through, or so it was a lot to do with personality. And then certain questions we would ask them about their goals, and you really tried to identify key things that were consistent. So if they did this 10 years ago, well, what was a main consistent point that they continued to do now today when you're sitting there interviewing them? And sometimes it's a high school kid, but you're looking for someone that maybe is a team player. They did sports, or they participated in extracurriculars. Like, it really sometimes came down to, for like the younger kids, I would tell them in an email before the interview, make sure you bring a pen, make sure you bring your resume. And if they didn't follow simple instructions, if they weren't on time, they didn't bring the pen, they're automatically things that I would just trigger me to think, okay, this might not be the right fit because they didn't follow instructions very well. So with Chick-fil-A, your interview, like in a corporate setting, when I worked for their home office in Atlanta, your interview started on the way that you treated the guy who picked you up from the airport.
Interesting.
How did you treat the person that greeted you at the reception desk? Sometimes they maybe would make you wait in the lobby just to see your body language and what you did when things didn't quite go as planned, because that's life. And so it really was maybe more like analyzing them, just sitting there more so than what they were saying, because people can tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah,
often.
Interesting enough, Fairway has a very similar process. When we're not necessarily here at my office, we certainly probably ought to pick some of those things up. But when we were interviewing, Nicole and I were interviewing with Fairway from the previous company we were at, looking for different company to go to. We were told later that, and maybe even I was given a hint ahead of time, if I'm not mistaken, by some of the people that have been here for a while, but they picked us up from the airport, had a driver pick us up, brought us into the we sat there in the reception area, and a lot of times, especially because I was coming in as a top producing loan officer, top producing people overall can be somewhat arrogant in many cases, and that's not the culture at all of Fairway. Our first core value as a company is humility first, right? And so they're looking for that, and it is very typical that I've heard stories of when they were interviewing top producing loan officers who come in there with these big giant egos, and they just go, hey, it sounds like you guys do a really good job of what you do, but I don't know that you'd be a great fit for us. Why don't we, I've heard this story. I've heard our CEO talk about this. Let's spend the next hour and a half thinking about what may be a good place for you guys to go to, because I don't think this is it. And then literally
They're
they've
almost trying
spent
to talk
time
you out of it.
helping them trying to find another place for them to go rather than here, which
So
is pretty unusual.
I have a fun story for you. So to become a Chick-fil-A operator, which I did, so I worked my way up through the company, but I went through 2 years worth of interviews to be selected as an operator.
Wow.
And there was like this thing that I don't know the statistic value of this, but they said it was harder to get a Chick-fil-A franchise than it was to get into Harvard.
Wow.
Or to get into the NFL. It was like, being on that kind of caliber. So I'm in Philadelphia, and I'm supposed to be flying in for my final interview to Atlanta to interview for a restaurant here in Raleigh. And when I have travel,
Now, I have to ask this. How old were you at this time?
I was 26.
Okay.
And so I was one of the youngest franchise operators in the chain. So I'm in Philly airport and I'm wearing sweatpants and I've got Beats headphones on and
You're traveling.
I'm traveling, but I'm also comfy, but I'm also nervous about the next day. And lo and behold, the person that is going to be interviewing me from the franchise selection team was on my flight, and Brandon was his name, and he saw me in the airport and came over, and so he moved his seat. We ended up flying together the whole way there. I was mortified. I was like, this is not me showing my best professional self. But I think the thing is, they want to know who you are.
Sure.
Because like you're a part of their company. You're the face of their brand. You're in their communities building that brand for them, and so it worked out, obviously. But I was definitely like,
That's definitely an
I
interesting
just still
story, too.
interviewed with him the next day.
Yeah.
But in
You
a
had a
more
little better feel of him.
formal setting. But yes, yeah.
So why don't we kind of fast forward a little bit so you end up, and you've told me this before, so if you want to say this kind of briefly, like how you ended up getting this role, right?
Yep.
In becoming an operator, which is they call it an owner operator?
They call it an owner operator.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, but you don't ever really own anything, do you?
So they have a very special operator agreement, and there are royalties that are paid through your P&L, and so you do have a lot of ownership, and I think that's what they're trying to portray. But I don't own the land, I don't own the building. So when you think about buying like a McDonald's franchise versus buying a Chick-fil-A franchise, the cost difference is significant. So no, I didn't have millions of dollars at 26 years old.
So, but and this is more of a curiosity. So, do you actually get like a K1, or do you are you just paid in bonuses and that kind of thing?
So I had an LLC that I ran the company through.
Okay.
And so every month you would do your inventory and you'd run your P&Ls, and Chick-fil-A took 15% of the initial profit, and then you would just then pay your employees, and then, so you kind of go down the P. And so really, it's just profit and loss. There wasn't like a salary that you're paying yourself. Like if the business didn't perform well because it's February and things were slow, well, that was reflected in what I took home. So it was set up what felt like more of a traditional business.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Wow, that's cool. So how did you end up here now? 7 years, is that right? I'm so 4 years in it. 4 years in your with your team, right?
Yeah. So the team, so we started the Home Sweet Home Raleigh group in February 2021. So we just celebrated 4 years. I've been in real estate. So I got my license in 2016. I was still with Chick-fil-A.
Okay.
I was doing well. The restaurant was thriving. We'd won a lot of things for sales, profitability. I won a Mustang, lots of fun stuff.
Wow.
So I was kind of at a point in that career where I was like, okay, well, now what? So I wanted to start investing in real estate. So I was like, oh, well, I'll just get my real estate license. Like a lot of people think, like, let me get this and I don't have to pay, commissions, etc.
Sure.
So I got my real estate license. And then I bought my first house in beginning of 2017. So that was 8 years ago? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
8 years ago, bought my first home. I was so proud. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a homeowner. I'm not even 30. And then it was like kind of an interesting process. And I had actually, my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, he had a lot of friends in the mortgage industry. And so I was like, oh, this is just cool. Like I was around it. And so my goal was to just take my profits at Chick-fil-A and buy investment homes. And so then it kind of took a turn. The Chick-fil-A on Fayetteville Street downtown that I was operating, actually, we were in the Sir Walter building, and they got bought out left, and the new developer that was coming in did not want the restaurant in the bottom level of that building. So I was kind of faced with, oh, well, we need to find you a new restaurant location. So I had interviewed.
They had to buy you out of a lease, or
No, I wasn't with the leasing. So Chick-fil-A actually has a lot of real estate they own, but when you think of mall concepts or
Sure.
more urban concepts like your New York, your downtown Colorado, stuff like that, they don't actually own those buildings, and so they are subject to a lease.
So you had to stay there until the end of that lease was
You do.
expiring.
So the
Okay,
lease was expiring, and they weren't renewing the lease.
Okay.
So I had a heads up for a while that was going to happen. Went back through franchise selection. Was actually selected for a urban concept in downtown Colorado, downtown
Okay.
Denver, and love Denver. My husband's actually there snowboarding right now. He's at Copper Mountain. So I was gonna move. I was gonna go, and then I don't know. Like you get this little voice in your head, and it tells you like it's not what you're supposed to do, and I couldn't shake it. And I thought about it and prayed about it, and just I don't know. Like so I went and flew to Atlanta, and I met with franchise selection, and I said, I've traveled all over the country. I've lived in many different states. I said, Raleigh is home, and there's something that is keeping me here. And I said, with all due respect, I want to turn down the opportunity. And I jumped just head on into real estate.
Wow.
I didn't even know what I was getting myself into. So I officially left Chick-fil-A once that restaurant closed. I did stay until it closed in 2018.
Okay.
So I didn't get into like full-time real estate until the tail end of 2018 and then 2019. So when we think about time and the business, you could say really 2018 would be.
Sure.
But yeah, I just, again, like talked to some of the people I knew in the industry, and I was like, okay, I want to know who some of the high performing teams are, who are the best out there. And so I started with a brokerage. I shadowed people constantly. I was like, okay, I worked my way up from Chick-fil-A, being a drive-through cashier at 15 years old, to owning the restaurant. I said I need to do the same thing in real estate. So,
Shadowing is a restaurant term that I think is extremely important. It's one of the things, I think a little bit. I used to have a food background, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so shadowing people is how you learn. You watch them do stuff. And it's how I learned when I first got in the mortgage business 20 some years ago, was I sat in a guy that got me hired, one of my best friends from high school, and literally just wrote down everything he said, right? And then I would ask him, why did you say this?
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much value in that, in learning from someone who already knows what they're doing. And because they don't really offer there's companies out there that do good training, but it's not like, how do you go from getting your license to going and get business, right? And so there's a lot like, what do you say? How do you say it? Who do you say it to? Mm-hmm. And shadowing, I think, is a big part of what can help someone. So I say that to say, those that may be listening to this that may be newer to the industry or thinking about the industry, that's a really important piece. I think you need to go ahead and find a mentor, mm-hmm. and then strap on and literally like find as much as you can and learn as quickly as you can from somebody who knows what they're doing.
I really couldn't agree more, because you learn so much in the field. Every house, every transaction, every client, they're going to have different goals. They're going to have different, you're like, I've never dealt with uranium in a well water situation, or I've never had to deal with like just the crazy things that could pop up. That real estate school can only teach you so much. Mm-hmm. Continuing education can only teach you so much. And it's kind of funny that we feel like when you're in the industry, it's not really at all what was on the exam. So I say get in the room with the right people. Like, be in the room with people that push you out of your comfort zone. And I think that's one of the things that I learned through Chick-fil-A. It had such a big grasp on leadership and like continuing personal development. So I actually always had a life coach or a business coach. And when I got into real estate, it was no different. I met with someone, like, maybe not weekly, maybe every other week, but I invested in myself. And so I had a coach, and you would sit down and
that's something that Chick-fil-A encouraged.
So the fun part about Chick-fil-A, when I did my tenure traveling and helping to open new restaurants, that was part of the program. You were assigned, and I actually loved my coach. Her name was Kristen. She actually lived in Colorado, and she got to be my business coach, life coach for a while.
Did she work for Chick-fil-A?
No, she worked for a company called Building Champions.
Oh, yeah. Building Champions.
But now she's got her own coaching firm. So Chick-fil-A hired Building Champions to come in, and they coached lenders and they coached mm-hmm. restaurant operators. And so we had that program. And then when you're an operator, you can choose to continue coaching but again, it's a personal expense at that
Yeah.
point because you're
Sure.
your own operator. So I did continue coaching, but when I got into real estate, I was like, okay, wait a minute, this is a brand new industry for me. Like, how am I going to learn? And so I did. I went back and hired a coach that could help me in the real estate industry. Plus, you're building a brand, you're building a business, and I think that that's one thing that when people get into this industry, they don't quite realize that it's not a hobby. If you're gonna really make it in this industry, we know the statistics for real estate is what 85% fail rate within the first 5 years of getting licensed.
Everybody's heard that stat that came out recently. 71% of agents last year didn't sell a house.
Yeah, and it's hard to kind of skew the statistics on that, whether they were property management
Sure.
or whether, like my mom has a real estate license and
but she didn't
she's
sell a
not
house.
active.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
there is a valid point in that the other thing I think with that was that only less than 2% sold over 45 houses or so. I forget the statistic, but so that was more to say, like, really interview your agent.
Yeah.
Do they know what they're doing? Because if you just do 2 transactions a year, are you really up to speed and having that?
Yeah, when I get a client that comes to me referred maybe by another past client or something like that, and naturally I want to refer them to one of the agents we work with, probably the agent that referred the client that referred them, but they're already attached to another agent. I always like, okay, let's find out if this person knows what they're doing. So I ask them questions about that agent, and they don't know most of the time, right? And I'm not here to go bash that person.
No, yeah, we're not taking them apart. You just want to make sure they're taken care of. Yeah.
Do you know what you're doing? Do you know what you're doing here? Because otherwise, I get to be the agent in that transaction, which is not fun because that's not licensed there. So, okay, so backing up, I wanted to say one thing too about Building Champions. Interesting thing, my first coaching company I ever jumped in with was Building Champions, and this was back in like 2004.
Okay.
And interesting story that you just reminded me of that I heard later about Building Champions is they were mostly a mortgage loan officer type company. That's where, and they mostly involved in real estate and mortgage coaching. And they had to to survive, they had to make a major pivot in 2008 when the market shifted. And they their biggest client became Chick-fil-A.
Yep.
And I had heard that before, but I totally forgot that until you mentioned that. So
yeah, so I was a client of Building Champions. And so I think maybe that's also why the real estate industry, because my coach coached mortgage lenders. I was an operator, but their background was...
Daniel Harkavy is the guy.
Yes,
that,
yeah.
I've met him a couple times. So very cool. Yeah. So you decide you're going to get into real estate. After you decide you're leaving, you decide you're not going to move to Denver.
Not moving to Denver.
And so obviously I'm sure this is a conversation you had. Were you guys engaged at that point? Or
no, okay. So we had been dating, but we dated for 8 years before we got married. So we were together a while.
Okay.
No, he was just the boyfriend. And I mean, you could say I was in love and I wanted to stay, but it really was just more than that. His family's here. My family's here. I love Raleigh. Raleigh's home. And something just kept drawing me to stay.
Yeah.
And plant roots here and build a business that was mine and that I could control a little bit more. I mean, not that you weren't a business owner through Chick-fil-A, but it's a little bit different when you build something from the ground up yourself. And so that entrepreneurial spirit in me, I just couldn't let it go. And so got into real estate, joined a team.
You joined a team.
I did join a team. And I think that that's really a smart way to go if you're a new agent and you're listening to this podcast. I would highly recommend, if you're going to try to do this independent, then you need a really strong mentor. But joining a team, you've got that back end support of I don't know what to do. This house, the septic system, there's so many scenarios that you've never...
Yeah, I say that to people all the time. They're like, hey, Michael, I'm thinking about getting my real estate license. Do you have any advice? And I will say, I personally, without a doubt, would find a team. I would go interview the best teams that I could find and then try to figure out which one I fit in best. Most of them, if you're worth hiring, most of them would all hire you, right?
Oh, I tell people that all the time. I'm like, you're interviewing the team.
That's right.
Because you have a license and you have something that you could pretty much get hired at any brokerage, really. I'm not saying that it's that simple, but I always tell new agents to go and interview with at least 3 to 5 teams, because you really want to feel whose culture, who's training, what environment, there's
a lot of dysfunctional teams out there. Let me be there's a lot of them, right? There's very few that are dialed in really, really well. And it takes typically years to get to the point where you've got that figured out. And so it's not, not to say you can't learn from a dysfunctional team. It's like a dysfunctional family.
No, you can learn everything not to do. But
but at the same time, there is, I think, a lot of value to find, folks that have been around, been successful. Let me be clear. There's teams that are very dysfunctional that have been around a long time too. So that's not the only answer.
No.
But you can get a pretty good sense, I think, if you interview them and meet the people on the team and find out like what that culture, like you said, what the culture's like.
Yeah.
And then what are the people producing? Like, how are they?
I tell people that too. I said, hey, don't just look at the team leader sales. Look at who are their top agents. Are they, like, if they're not selling more than 5 million, then why?
Mm-hmm.
What's happening? How are leads being distributed? How's coaching? You know, what type of training are you going to get? And I think also coming in, it's a lot to do. You've got to market yourself. You've got to brand yourself. You are not only, it's not just like cold calling and door knocking and open houses, but it's like, hey, well, now that I've got one, I don't have a lender. I don't have a handyman. I don't have a home inspector. You're starting over from scratch. Like
Sure.
you're coming into an industry and you don't have those relationships built. So joining a team would be a huge advantage to someone new, because then you already have somebody trust, like, you're like, oh, okay, they trust this home inspector.
Right.
I can trust you
There's
too.
those that would say, yeah, but they're going to take half my commission, right? And I think that's just such a short-sighted, because you're going to get way more than that half the commission and experience.
You can't focus on money. I
Yeah.
don't think, well, I'll be honest, in any career, if you are focused on money, that's not passion, and that's not going to propel you. Money's going to come and go in life, but I think that the more successful you are is when you are focused on, well, what am I passionate about? And because there's going to be those days where you've got to look back and say, why am I doing this?
Sure.
So in the beginning, I think it's less about money, and you really need to be focused on, okay, let me get into this industry. Let me learn.
How do I
boots
get
on the
good?
ground. How do I get good at it? Yeah. And then the money will come.
Yep.
And I think that that's with any business, though.
Yeah, I agree completely. So let's we're going to get to some transparency here a little bit. I want to curious to hear a little bit about maybe some of the bigger or lessons learned. Like when you started in real estate and maybe even started your team, what are some of the biggest, if you call them failures or whatever, that you had to go, oh my gosh, I can't believe we did that, and here's what we learned from it.
So let's think failures, because it's always hard to talk about the things that we did wrong in life. I would say, actually, believe it or not, I hired bad people too.
Yeah.
Like you hired someone because they were your friend.
Yeah.
Or you hired someone because there were some good hires.
Sure.
I don't, anybody listening to this, they were all bad. But I think people is a big thing when you're starting your own team. You're just like, not everyone has the drive and the work ethic, and it's hard to figure that out.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, they did amazing with that client, but can they handle 15 of these? Like,
Sure.
Can they handle the juggling of the schedules and just it? I think in the beginning of starting a team too, you also don't realize how much operational support that you need. It's not just hiring agents. It is hiring someone to train those agents, to help answer those questions. It's hiring someone maybe to do marketing for you. Because when you're a business owner, you wear so many different hats. So one of the things that I learned is do only what only you can do. And so from failure.
Talk more about that.
So when I look at my day, can I delegate that to somebody else? How much money is that going to, how much time is that going to cost me? So when I'm looking at the day and I'm looking at the operations and I'm looking at how we're structuring this business, what is something that I don't really need to be involved in? And so if you start figuring out how you can delegate, and then you're hiring based on who can perform that task well versus just focusing on hiring a good agent, because then that poor agent is going to be like, oh, but we don't have this operationally, or who's helping me with this? So it's not just having a transaction coordinator. It's not just a great agent. I think it's a very well-rounded look at what does the business need, because you're going to be pulled in a different direction if this agent needs help and you don't have anybody else there that's able to answer questions, but then you're working on this marketing campaign, and then it's just, I think the balance is something that you learn over time too, and that might be a good failure I could talk about. It's
part of those things, right? I think, or you have to go through that experience to understand, okay, am I the best person to do this? One of the things that we've talked about, the coaching that I've been involved in for years, talk about if you can hire somebody to do it 80% as good as you, then don't do it. You let that person do it. In many cases, they end up doing it better than you can do it, because it just better suits their specific talents. Some of the stuff we do just because it has to get done doesn't mean I'm going to be the best person to do it. My team now is very good at recognizing, hey, Michael, will you get out of that? Like, stop messing with that.
That's great that they recognize that too.
We talk about it a lot, but very much like it's specifically one of the worst ones, and I'm so bad at this because I just believe in answering the freaking phone. And so many people don't answer the freaking phone. And so when you call our number, my number, I have a personal cell, and then I've got a team number. And so everything that we put on marketing is the team number. And so when that number rings, it rings to my phone, it rings to Nicole's phone, it rings to Taylor's phone, it rings to Ann's phone. And so any one of those people can answer it. The goal is, like, it should never ring more than twice. And so if it's heading towards that third or fourth ring, then I'm going to answer it, and they don't want me answering it, right? So
I like that metric. They can kind of gauge.
Yes.
They're like, oh, we're doing a good job because Michael didn't have to answer the phone today.
That's right. Because ultimately it pulls me away from what I'm supposed to be doing.
Isn't there a statistic about that? If you get interrupted, it takes like 15 minutes to get back to what you were doing, and
That's right.
You can't really function your job well when
That's exactly right. Right. So, my main job is making sure that I'm building relationships to bringing leads. I make promises for them, and then they have to fulfill the promises that I make, right? And so I got to be careful to not overpromise, so that they're not, being able to not accomplish what I say that they're going to be able to do. And 99.99% of the time, they just crush and do so much better than I
think
would
you
do
have a great team.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
No, they're all
stellar.
stellar.
It's but it takes a long time to build that, right? Like Nicole and I just celebrated 10 years of her being on the team a couple weeks ago. And, first of all, I'm grateful that somebody besides my wife and my daughter would stick with me for more than 10 years. But fortunately, I think Nicole would say the same thing. We've got Tanya said the other day to somebody, she's like, he couldn't have picked a better work wife, than Nicole ever. And so it's worked out
that's
really
awesome
well
that you need those people, though.
Yeah.
Because they're helping you build this brand, and that's awesome that you have them. So.
Yeah. And so, all right, so let's talk a little bit about, so you've talked about maybe some hiring. One of the things I want to say too about hiring, we hire, frankly, I think in so many cases based on emotional thoughts and decisions, because we like that person or we think that they're going to be. I don't know about you, but I'm generally really optimistic. So I just believe, oh my gosh, they're going to do all of these things, right? And then in reality, if we didn't vet them enough or go through, then it's not that they're a bad person. They could be a great person,
right? Just
not the right person for that role. I'll give you a perfect example. One of my friends that we used to own a gym, she saw that I'd posted an advertisement for a processor role. This is back in like 2018. And she rings me up and she's like, hey, Michael, I saw you have a processor role open. I would love to be your processor. And I was like, her name's Alex. And I said, Alex, I love you, but you will never, ever, ever be my processor. You would hate that job. You would never, she's not the kind of person that could sit in front of a computer all day.
Right.
But we ended up finding another role from her, and she became our event coordinator and did a lot of marketing for us, and she did amazing at that.
Well, that's good that you recognized that, though, and you were honest with her about that. I will tell you a fun fact. I actually thought I wanted to be a mortgage lender.
Oh, really?
And I went to my friend that was in mortgages, and he goes, oh, no, girl, you're going to be a real estate agent.
Well, he helped you.
But he was honest that, he was like, this fits you better. And so I think that's good that you were honest with Alex, and then you did find your role for her. But having people in our life like that is important. And I think, we get excited and we're like, oh, we want to do a good job, or I think I'd be great at this. But having someone really sit you down and say, actually, like that was perfect for her. You did her a favor.
And it did us all a favor. It worked out great. So excellent. So let's talk a little maybe how you're building your team now and what your not necessarily goals specifically are, but like tell me about the culture of your team and what you're looking to build.
So right now we know that people have a ton of options in the triangle. I think, there's 15,000, I don't know how many active agents licensed, but we are basing it really on relationships. I take a lot of things back to that hospitality piece of Chick-fil-A. We have options. They could go to Wendy's, they could go to Burger King, but they go to Chick-fil-A. Why? Okay, great product. Okay, so we can build a great team where we can have great customer service and stuff, but I think there's more to that. I think it's relational, because you want those referrals and you want to become almost like that trusted advisor. Mm-hmm. So I want the people who work with us not only to just think of us when it's time to buy and sell, like, oh crap, my water heater just busted. Like, I know that Darrena's team is going to have a great referral for me. So it's not just the transaction, because you're only going to buy a house, every 5 to 7, 10 years. It's not like this. Sure. It's not like Chick-fil-A where they're buying a sandwich once a week for their kid. But I think that you want to make people feel and they're going to remember that feeling.
Yeah.
They're not going to really remember the paperwork. It was annoying, great, but that's not what you remember about buying your first home.
No. Yeah.
You remember the excitement. You remember the journey. Yeah, maybe there were challenges, but we like to talk about it like, hey, us and the lender are like the pilot and co-pilot. So we do focus right now building those vendor relationships. Who's co-piloting this transaction with us? Because I think that makes a huge difference too when we talk about hospitality and customer service and what we're trying to build this brand on. Who else is in that? Is your home inspector
Yeah.
going to represent you well? Is the person who's helping fix these repairs? Like, there's just so many things that go into a transaction. We like to tell people there's probably like 20 something odd steps or people in the background, not just your agent.
Sure.
But the agent, the firm that you select have built relationships with those people. So you're kind of already married to the other people in the process. And so right now we really focus on building strong relationships with other local folks in the market who are in the industry. Outside of that, we're really focusing on our systems and processes, not just automations like, oh, here's an email reminding you to turn your utilities on. I don't like canned response. I don't really like that. I'm not going to text you this generic canned message. It's more the back end for us operationally. How do we make it easier for the agents? How do we make our day-to-day stuff a little bit more streamlined? So I spend a lot of my time working on systems and processes in the back end, because I think if you can get that right, that just helps your day flow better. And then you're not focused on, oh, did we get that paperwork signed correctly? And like, because real estate has so much paperwork.
Sure.
I'll be honest with you, like, I'm not the detail-oriented like person, so that's somebody I hire for.
Yeah.
And so I do spend a lot of time making sure that the team feels supported with the systems that they're using. If I don't like the CRM that the brokerage has, well, let's go explore a new avenue that'll be more user-friendly. So vendors, I would say relationships. And then I do have a huge piece on marketing. Like, how do people find us? Well, we think about pop buys or like surprises that we give past clients, but how do we find new people? So maybe we put on a client appreciation event or a first time home buyer seminar. So a lot of it goes down to like, well, where do we want to spend money and where are we going to get the most return? Because you want to attract people to come and work with you. But I think the greatest gift is a referral. So
Yeah.
obviously we spend a lot of time building those like raving fan relationships. I think we've talked about raving fans before. And that's also a Chick-fil-A term.
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A had everyone's got those award programs, like you go through the drive-through 10 times, you get a free sandwich or whatever.
Yep.
I can't give you a free house. So you can't, buy 10 houses with me, you get one free. I can't do something like that in this industry, but you do kind of think about who's supporting you, who's going to send referrals. Maybe they're not buying, but that doesn't mean they're not a raving fan of your business. And so what we're doing right now is really identifying who are those people that support Taylor on my team or support Christine on my team. Who are their raving fans, and how do we, do something to support them so that they'll send us referrals?
Yeah, it's just really top of mind. I think is a big part of that, right? So you have to consistently do, and I know you've gotten really good at doing a lot more video, social media, and making sure that you are top of mind to those folks. I want to wrap up here in just a few minutes, but anything else particular that you wanted to share? As we've kind of talked about doing this podcast for a little bit, anything in particular that you want to like just make sure that you feel like for the person listening or watching that they learned either about you or about what you've gone through?
I think we touched on a lot of it. Like, the story correlating between my past. You can't deny, like, I spent 15 plus years at Chick-fil-A, and there was a ton that I learned through that. But just I think when you think about real estate, you don't want it to be so transactional. I want people to know that you're a person and I care about you, and this is more about what are your goals. I'm not going to try to, in fact, I probably try to talk you out of buying that house. I'm like, okay, where are your Amazon packages going? Okay, when it's raining and you're unloading groceries, how do you feel about this? Or, hey, when we look at your backyard, I know you love grilling. Do you have enough space for entertainment? And so I'm constantly trying to get to know this person on a level of like, how are you living your life? Do you like to cook? This kitchen might get annoying because two people can't be back here while the oven door's open. Like, when I'm looking at a home, I'm looking at it through the lens of their lifestyle.
Sounds like you're doing is creating thoughts in their minds that they haven't yet thought about, that you can visualize for them so they can figure out, I didn't think about that, or wow, this would be great for this. My wife's company, she owns an advertising firm, and their kind of slogan is give a damn, right? Like, it is. I think that's just such an important, crucial
Yeah.
step that there are so many people that are in sales that are just trying to make a sale. And while I'm very grateful every time we make a sale and we help a client get a new home, ultimately, if the client is not absolutely thrilled with what we've done for them, then we've failed. And that's just not what we're about.
I agree. Yeah.
Because we want that client to be absolutely thrilled so they become a raving fan so that it's not as hard to go find the next client, right?
Well, we think
To be
about
able
it
to serve.
too. What are they like? Buying a home is a big deal, or selling a home. Like we also do a lot of listings. And that story, what are they talking about at the dinner table? What are they telling their friend? It's an experience that they're going to talk about. How are they going to talk about you? How are they going to talk about the agent that helped them? Because that's going to come up in conversation.
That's literally what your brand is, right? What people say about you when you're not around, that is your brand.
Exactly.
And so you're building, right? You're consistently trying to build a brand that speaks highly of what you do to other people so that attracts more folks. So
Yeah, exactly. So really, that's our focus. And if you're a seller, like it's the same thing. It's like, how do I make this process easier for you?
Sure.
Like, it's tedious moving. So like sometimes we'll send moving boxes, or we're like, okay, I'll go ahead and call the moving companies for you. Like, what can we take off your plate? Because we realize it's very full right now.
Yeah.
How can we
just living life is tough enough.
anticipate
Trying to
needs?
think about buying or selling a house in the middle of it.
Yeah, like I think another thing maybe correlating back to Chick-fil-A is we had this thing called second mile service. Well, when you go to a restaurant, you're expecting them to give you a clean environment, a good meal, and but what are you doing on top of that? And so when we think about the real estate industry, okay, great. Yes, I need a lender. Yes, I need this. Yes, I need this. But outside of transactionally, how are you standing out? What are we doing that's going above and beyond what you expected us to do? So exceeding expectations is really, I think, where you can fine tune, like, how are you setting yourself apart? How are you making the experience better?
Yeah, that's literally the book Raving Fans talks about
Yeah.
that specifically, right? So, well, listen, Darrena, I just want to say thank you so much for coming and spending this time with us. I've really enjoyed getting to learn more about you.
you.
Hopefully, a lot of other folks will get to learn more about you as well. And for those of you out there that are listening and watching, I just want to say thank you for watching. We really appreciate it. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what you'd like to hear about next, or if you know any other folks that you'd like to see us interview, be sure to reach out to us. But thanks so much for coming to see us on Beyond the Closing Table.